With Christmas just days away, on a winter night in Michigan, snow swirls, children clutch golden tickets, and a 400-ton steam locomotive charges out of the dark. This is the Pere Marquette 1225, the real engine behind the Polar Express. So how did a wartime freight brute, built for steel and schedules, end up carrying belief, wonder, and Christmas itself? To understand that, we have to go back to where this story truly begins. Pere Marquette 1225 began life far from Christmas lights or storybooks. Built in October 1941 by Lima Locomotive Works, it was an N1 Class 284 Berkshire steam locomotive designed for the Pere Marquette Railway, entering service as the United States edged toward World War II. Standing nearly 16 feet tall and stretching over 100 feet with its tender 1,225 weight, close to 400 tons in working order. Its 245 psi boiler and massive cylinders, driving 69-inch wheels, produced around 69,000 pounds of tractive effort. Endurance engineered to move tonnage relentlessly, mile after mile. But machines aren't remembered for specifications alone. On paper, 1,225 reads like pure machinery, a rolling furnace designed to shove tonnage across the Midwest. But numbers don't explain presence. And they don't explain what that kind of power actually feels like on the rails. 1,225 worked hard in service. It hauled wartime freight, steel, coal, and manufactured goods across Michigan between Detroit, Flint, Saginaw, and northern Indiana's steel mills. After the Pere Marquette merged into the Chesapeake and Ohio in 1947, it continued pulling fast freights over long mainline runs. Crews remembered the Berkshires for their aggressive exhaust and rapid acceleration. They didn't just move trains, they launched them, turning flat Midwestern track into a test of traction and muscle. But even the most advanced steam locomotive was living on borrowed time. What happens when the world's needs change faster than the machines built to serve them? And even giants must give way. That question didn't linger for long. By the early 1950s, diesel locomotives were rapidly replacing steam across the Chesapeake and Ohio system. Efficient, cleaner, and cheaper to run, diesels made even the most powerful steam engines obsolete almost overnight. Renumbered 2659, Pere Marquette 1225 was retired in 1951 and stored alongside sister locomotives in Michigan yards at Wyoming and New Buffalo. It was no longer a machine with a purpose, but a problem waiting to be solved. Because of this, its future looked painfully ordinary. Like most steam locomotives of its era, it was considered obsolete as diesel power spread across American railroads. For several years, the engine sat cold and silent, waiting for the scrapyard. Then in 1957, its path shifted. Michigan State University trustee Forrest Akers arranged for 1225 to be donated to MSU as a monument to the fading age of steam. Instead of being cut apart, it was placed on a short stretch of track near Spartan Stadium, where the massive black engine became a static campus fixture, slowly weathering as students hurried past. To university administrators, it was little more than an oversized relic, outdated technology taking up valuable space. But to one child in the crowd, it felt different. And that's exactly what happened. Before we get to that part, take a second to like the video and subscribe. It takes less time than this sentence, and no steam locomotives will be harmed if you do. Back on those fall game days in the late 1950s and early 1960s, a young boy named Chris Van Allsburg visited the campus with his father. While crowds streamed toward the stadium, he climbed onto the locomotive, exploring its cab, wheels, and towering boiler. One detail lodged itself firmly in his imagination: the brass number plate on the smokebox door, 1-2-2-5. To him, it read as 12/25. Christmas Day. The size, stillness, and quiet authority of the engine made it feel less like scrap and more like something asleep, waiting. Decades later, Van Allsburg would say those childhood encounters stayed with him long after he left the campus behind. For years, no one else saw anything special. The locomotive sat unloved, weathered, and occasionally discussed as disposable, officially just a silent showpiece. However, while adults questioned its worth, a child was unknowingly turning it into the emotional core of a future Christmas legend, one that would give 1225 a second life far louder than anyone imagined. While Pere Marquette 1225 weathered quietly on campus, the question of its disposal never fully disappeared. Then in the late 1960s, a small group of Michigan State students looked past the rust. In 1969, they formed the MSU Railroad Club and committed to restoring the locomotive, not as a monument, but as a working machine. The dream sounded simple. The reality was not. A handful of Michigan State students had limited tools, almost no money, and borrowed time. Yet somehow, they believed they could revive a 400-ton steam locomotive that hadn't moved since 1951. So they began with whatever they could reach. They fixed damaged components, freed what had seized, and tested the steam theory they learned in classrooms beneath the locomotive at night. By 1975, the boiler was hot enough to raise steam, and when 1225's whistle finally blew after more than 2 decades, many remembered it as the moment the campus realized the engine wasn't dead after all. Safety and liability concerns soon pushed the project off campus, leading in 1979 to the creation of an independent nonprofit, the Michigan State Trust for Railway Preservation. The paperwork solved one problem, but not the biggest one. Restoring a steam locomotive demanded serious infrastructure. The real question was simple. Where could they possibly finish the job? The answer came in 1982, when 1225 was moved to the former Ann Arbor Railroad backshop in Owasso, a full-scale steam facility equipped with pits, cranes, and heavy machine tools. There, the locomotive finally faced the major repairs it needed. In November 1985, 1,225 moved under its own power for the first time in 34 years. Then in 1988, it was hauling excursion trains, and the organization behind it had evolved into today's Steam Railroading Institute. Within the railfan world, 1,225 quickly became a legend. But beyond that small circle, it was still just another excursion engine, right up until a movie studio went searching for a real locomotive to bring a Christmas train to life. Years later, in 1985, author and illustrator Chris Van Allsburg, the same child who once climbed over Pere Marquette 1225 at Michigan State University, published The Polar Express, a story centered on a powerful, mysterious steam locomotive. Its scale, presence, and even its number, 1,225, were drawn directly from memory, shaped by the engine that had loomed over his childhood and quietly stayed with him for decades. The book became a classic, passed from generation to generation, but it existed only on paper. So when Hollywood decided to bring the Polar Express to the screen nearly 20 years later, the challenge was obvious. An illustrated train had to feel real at cinematic scale. Bringing the story to film required something real. When the Polar Express was being prepared for the screen in the early 2000s, Warner Brothers turned to the Steam Railroading Institute in Owasso with a clear goal: ground the movie's train in reality. Volunteers opened their archives, supplying original Lima Locomotive Works blueprints, mechanical drawings, and precise measurements preserved since the restoration years. The film's artists and engineers used Pere Marquette 1225 as their primary physical model. Driver spacing, boiler height, pilot shape, and the mass of the smoke box were traced directly from a living, breathing 284 Berkshire. But visuals alone never sell reality. To make the illusion believable, they needed more than animation. They needed sound. Sound crews traveled to Owasso and recorded Pere Marquette 1225 in operation. They captured everything: the deep exhaust bark under load, the whistle cutting through winter air, the steady thump of air pumps, and the hiss of safety valves. Those sounds were shaped for the 2004 film, but never invented. What audiences hear in the Polar Express is a real Berkshire at work. That is why Pere Marquette 1225 is known today as the real Polar Express. Its steel gave the train its shape, its motion gave it weight, and its voice carried Christmas magic onto the screen. Today, Pere Marquette 1225 stands as the working centerpiece of winter in Michigan. Based at the Steam Railroading Institute in Owasso, it powers the seasonal North Pole Express, now the heart of a modern Christmas tradition. Even if the trip sounds simple, the journey itself doesn't feel ordinary. It carries something deeper, shaped by memory, motion, and nostalgia. The experience begins before anyone boards. Families gather in pajamas, scarves, and vintage coats as 1225 rolls in, steam drifting through the lights and its headlamp cutting the cold. Inside the coaches, hosts punch souvenir believe tickets while hot chocolate moves down the aisles. In Cocoa Class and Claus Club, mugs are filled as carolers pass car to car. Beyond the windows, snow-dusted Michigan fields slide by in darkness. Each time the locomotive digs in, its exhaust beats rise through the floor, deep physical reminders that this is a full-size Berkshire at work. In Ashley, riders step into a small-town Christmas of lights, shops, food stalls, model railroads, and a visit with Santa, framed by mid-century holiday decor. And all of this rests on one simple fact: A steam locomotive built in 1941 is still doing demanding work in the modern era because it is carefully maintained to do so. That work happens year-round. During the off-season, SRI staff and volunteers focus on inspections and heavy repairs, including the federally required 1,472 service day boiler overhaul. This includes rebuilding boiler systems, repairing superheaters, and testing every critical pressure component. Recent seasons have required major tube and superheater replacements, funded entirely by donations. So when 1225's whistle echoes across Owasso on a freezing night, it isn't nostalgia at work. It's a fully certified steam locomotive, maintained to keep running one season at a time. So what do you think? Does the magic live in the polished movie train, or in the real 1225 shaking the ground beneath your feet? Would you choose perfect CGI snow, or coal smoke and cold steel? Tell us in the comments. And if you want another story where steel, speed, and legacy collide, don't miss our video on Pennsylvania Railroad 3750. After all, some magic doesn't need pixels, it just needs steam.